What kind of God chooses an outsider to carry the hope of the world? Not a king, not a prophet, not even an Israelite. A woman born among a people Israel had every reason to distrust. Pause for a moment and let that settle. There is a name buried in the family tree of Jesus that should not be there. It sits among kings and patriarchs, among the great fathers of Israel: Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David. A line of men stretching back 1,000 years, each one handing the promise to the next. And then, without warning, the list breaks. A woman, not a queen, not a daughter of Israel, a foreigner, a widow, a woman from Moab, one of the most hated nations in the ancient world. A people Israel was forbidden by law to welcome. A people whose very name carried the memory of betrayal. By every rule of that world, her name should have been erased, forgotten, left to die on the wrong side of a border. Instead, it was written into the bloodline of the Messiah. Her name was Ruth. And the question that has echoed for 3,000 years is not how she survived, it is why God would want her there at all. To understand why her name matters, you have to understand the world she was born into. The Bible describes that age in a single, haunting line. In those days there was no king in Israel, and everyone did what was right in their own eyes. This was the time of the judges, a broken stretch of history, after Moses, after Joshua, before any throne. The people had a land, but no center, a God, but no memory of him. They would forget, and suffer, and cry out, and be rescued, and then forget again. The same wound, reopening for generations. It was a violent, uncertain, God-hungry time. And into that darkness, famine came to a town called Bethlehem. The name means house of bread. Now there was no bread in it. In a small house in that starving town lived a man named Elimelech, his wife Naomi, and their 2 sons. His name meant, "My God is King," a bold thing to be called in an age with no king at all. But hunger does not bow to names. When the fields died and his children grew thin, Elimelech made a decision that would have scandalized his neighbors. He left the promised land, and he went to Moab. To an Israelite, Moab was not simply a foreign country. It was a name spoken like a curse. The hatred went back centuries, back to a night of shame in a cave, when the nation of Moab was born of incest after fire fell on Sodom. It deepened in the wilderness, when Moab refused Israel bread and water on their long walk to freedom, then hired a prophet to curse them, then sent its women to lure them into betrayal. The law itself drew the line in stone. No Moabite, it said, shall enter the assembly of the Lord, not even to the 10th generation. 10 generations, a wall built to last 400 years. This was the land Elimelech walked into, and it was in this land, among these people, that his sons did the unthinkable. The 2 young men married Moabite women. One was named Orpah, the other was named Ruth. For a while, in a foreign country, a fragile new life took root. 2 households, a family learning to breathe again, far from home. And then death walked through the door and would not leave. First, Elimelech, the father, gone. Then, in a silence the story barely describes, both sons, gone. 3 women were left standing in the wreckage, 3 widows. No husbands, no sons, no protection. In the ancient world, a woman without a man was a woman without a future. No income, no inheritance, no voice at the city gate. Naomi had crossed a border to escape starvation. Now she was starving in a different way. Word finally reached her that the famine in Bethlehem had broken, that God had visited his people and given them bread again. So Naomi did the only thing left to do. She turned toward home. The 2 younger women walked with her. And somewhere on that dusty road between Moab and Judah, Naomi stopped. She turned to look at them, these 2 foreign girls who had married her dead sons, and she told them to go back. Go home, she said. Back to your mothers, back to your own gods, your own people, your own chance at a life. I am too old to give you husbands. I have nothing left to offer you but my own bitterness." It was, in its own way, an act of love. She was setting them free. Orpah wept, and then Orpah did the sensible thing, the understandable thing. She kissed her mother-in-law goodbye, and she went home. No one should blame her. She chose safety. She chose her people. She chose the life she knew. But Ruth would not let go. Naomi pushed her toward the road. "Look," she said, "your sister has gone back to her people and her gods. Go with her." And Ruth answered with words so fierce and so tender, they have never stopped echoing. "Do not beg me to leave you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. Nothing but death itself will ever come between us." Sit for a moment with what she was actually saying. She was renouncing her nation, her family, her gods, everything that had ever told her who she was. She was walking, eyes open, into a country that had every legal reason to reject her, to become a poor foreign widow in a town full of strangers. She was choosing a God she had every reason to fear, and a people who had every reason to turn her away. And she chose them anyway. Naomi stopped arguing. Some kinds of love you cannot talk a person out of. When they finally reached Bethlehem, the whole town stirred. "Is this Naomi?" the women whispered. "The one who left us all those years ago?" And Naomi answered from somewhere deep and broken. "Do not call me Naomi," she said. "The name means pleasant. Call me Mara instead. Call me bitter, because I went out full, and the Lord has brought me back empty." She did not even see the woman standing beside her. She thought she had returned with nothing. She had no idea what she had brought home. It was the beginning of the barley harvest. The fields around Bethlehem turned gold, and the reapers moved through them under a hard sun. Ruth, a stranger in a strange land, with an old woman to feed and no man to provide, did the only thing the poorest people could do. She went to glean. There was a law in Israel, old and quietly radical. When you harvested your field, you were forbidden to harvest the corners. You could not go back for what you dropped. Whatever fell, whatever was missed, whatever grew at the edges, that belonged to the poor, to the widow, to the orphan, and, written right into the law, to the foreigner. It was mercy built on dignity. The hungry did not beg, they worked. They gathered what the landowner had deliberately left behind. So Ruth walked into a field to pick up the leftovers of other people's abundance. And here, the storyteller does something careful. He tells us she happened to come to a field belonging to a man named Boaz. She happened to, as if by accident, as if by chance, as if no one were watching. Boaz was a man of standing, wealthy, respected, and he was, though Ruth did not yet know it, a relative of her dead father-in-law. He came out to his fields that day and saw a woman he did not recognize, bent over in the heat behind his workers. He asked who she was. "She's the Moabite," they told him, "the one who came back with Naomi. She's been on her feet since morning. Now watch what a man of that world was free to do." He could have ignored her. He could have had her removed. A foreign woman in his field was a foreign woman. Nothing more. Instead, Boaz walked over to her. "Stay in my field," he told her. "Keep close to my women. I've told the men not to touch you, not to trouble you. When you're thirsty, drink from the water my own workers have drawn." Ruth fell on her face in the dirt. "Why?" she asked him. "Why would you even notice me? I'm a foreigner." And Boaz gave an answer that reveals everything about the God at the center of this story. "I've heard what you did," he said. "How you left your father and mother and the land of your birth, and came to a people you never knew. May the Lord repay you. May you be fully rewarded by the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Under whose wings. Remember that phrase. It will come back. Then he did more. He sat the foreign widow among his workers and fed her until she was full. He told his men to pull grain from their own bundles and drop it for her to find. He was rigging the harvest in her favor, quietly, without announcement, without ever making her feel it. That evening she came home carrying so much grain that Naomi was stunned. "Whose field?" she demanded, and when Ruth said the name, Boaz, something in Naomi woke up for the first time in years. "That man," she whispered, "is one of our redeemers." There was a role in Israelite law unlike anything in the modern world. A single word, Goel, the kinsman redeemer. When a family fell into ruin, when land was lost, when a man died without an heir, the Goel was the one who stepped in, the nearest able relative. His task was to buy back what had been lost, to pay the price the family could not pay, to restore what was broken, and rescue those who could not rescue themselves. The Redeemer did not have to be asked, but he did have to be willing, and it always cost him something. Naomi understood, suddenly, what she was looking at. Boaz was family. Boaz had the right to redeem. Boaz could restore the future that death had stolen from them. But he had not yet stepped forward, and the harvest was ending. So the woman who had called herself bitter began, carefully, to hope. The threshing floor was where grain was separated from chaff, where the men worked late and slept beside their piles of barley to guard them through the night. Naomi told Ruth to wash, to anoint herself, to put on her finest cloak, to go to the threshing floor after dark, after Boaz had eaten and lain down, and then to uncover his feet, and lie down, and wait. It was bold to the edge of scandal. A woman, alone, at night, beside a sleeping man. But it was not seduction. In the language of that culture, it was a proposal, a plea for protection, made in the dark, at enormous risk, by a woman with nothing left but her nerve. In the middle of the night, Boaz woke with a start. Someone was there. "Who are you?" he asked into the darkness. And Ruth answered, "I am Ruth, your servant. Spread the corner of your cloak over me, for you are a redeemer." The word she used for cloak was the same word Boaz had spoken over her in the field, wings. He had prayed that God would shelter her under his wings. And now this foreign widow was looking at him in the dark and saying, in effect, "Then be the answer to your own prayer. Be the wings. Cover me." Boaz was undone by it. "May the Lord bless you," he said. "This kindness is greater than the last. You could have chased after younger men. You didn't. Don't be afraid. I will do everything you ask." But then he told her the truth, the complication that could break everything. There was another man, a relative even closer than he was, and by law, that man had the first right to redeem, the first claim on the land, the first claim on Ruth. Boaz would not simply take what he wanted. He was a man of the gate. He would do this the right way, or not at all. He sent her home before dawn, with her cloak heavy with grain, and a promise. By the end of this day, one way or another, it will be settled. In the morning, Boaz went up to the city gate. The gate was the courtroom of the ancient world, the place where deals were struck, disputes settled, futures decided, all in the open, before witnesses. He gathered 10 of the town's elders, and he waited. When the other redeemer passed by, Boaz called him over and laid the matter out. "Naomi is selling the land that belonged to Elimelech. You are first in line. Will you redeem it?" The man said yes at once. Land was wealth. Of course he would take it. And then Boaz added the part that changed everything. "On the day you buy the field," he said, "you also take Ruth the Moabite, to raise up an heir in her dead husband's name, so the family line does not die." The man's face changed. An heir born to Ruth would not carry his name. It would carry the name of the dead. The cost would be his. The legacy would belong to someone else. It threatened his own inheritance, and so he stepped back. "I cannot redeem it," he said. "Do it yourself." Then, in an old custom, he drew off his sandal and handed it to Boaz, the ancient sign that a right had been surrendered, a bargain sealed. And in front of the whole town, Boaz said the words, "I have bought it all, the land, and Ruth, she will be my wife. Today, you are my witnesses." The elders blessed them, and something remarkable happened in that blessing. The same town that had every legal reason to shun a Moabite prayed that this foreign woman would be like Rachel and Leah, the mothers of the nation of Israel. The wall had a door in it after all. Boaz took Ruth as his wife. And the woman who had gleaned in the corners of a field, the widow with no future, the outsider on the wrong side of the border, she conceived and bore a son. The women of Bethlehem crowded around Naomi and placed the baby in her arms. She had gone out full and come back empty. Now her empty arms were full. They named the boy Obed. And here, the story quietly detonates. Why? Because Obed grew up and had a son named Jesse, and Jesse had 8 sons, and the youngest of them, a shepherd boy out in the fields around Bethlehem, was named David. King David, the greatest king Israel would ever know, the one from whose line God had promised the Messiah would come. Ruth, the Moabite, the outsider, the woman the law said could not enter, was his great-grandmother. Everything in her story had been leading here, without her ever knowing it. Every death, every loss, every step on that road. The famine that drove a family to Moab. The love that crossed a forbidden border. The widow's refusal to turn back. The field she happened to walk into. 1,000 years later, in that same small town of Bethlehem, another child would be born into that same bloodline, and the angels would call him the Son of David. So return to the question we began with. Why would God do this? Look closer, and you begin to see the answer was never only about Ruth. Consider Boaz, a man who saw someone with no claim on him, no right to his help, nothing to offer him in return. A relative willing to pay a price he did not owe, to redeem a life that could not redeem itself, to cover a stranger and call her his own. That is not just the story of one good man in one barley field. That is the shape of the entire gospel. Centuries later, a carpenter's son from this very town would do the same thing on an infinitely greater scale. He would look at people with no claim on him. He would pay a price he did not owe. He would redeem lives that could not redeem themselves. He would spread his wings over strangers, over the guilty and the far off, and call them his own. Boaz was the shadow. Jesus was the substance. The Redeemer of Bethlehem was pointing forward, across 1,000 years, to the Redeemer of the world. And this is why, when Matthew sat down to write the very first page of the New Testament, the genealogy of Jesus, he made a choice that broke every convention of his time. Ancient genealogies were lists of men, fathers and sons, fathers and sons. Women were almost never named. Matthew named them anyway. And the women he chose were not the safe, respectable matriarchs everyone expected. They were the scandalous ones, the outsiders. Tamar, wronged and desperate. Rahab, a Canaanite from the walls of Jericho. Bathsheba, named in the shadow of a king's great sin. And Ruth, the Moabite. Matthew was not being careless. He was preaching a sermon in the shape of a family tree. He was telling us, before Jesus draws a single breath in the story, exactly who this Messiah came for. Not the pure, not the powerful, not the ones who already belonged. He came for the outsider, the foreigner, the broken, the ones the law kept out. The genealogy is the message. Grace was in the bloodline all along, and there is something here for anyone who has ever felt they were standing on the wrong side of a wall. Ruth did not earn her place. She was not born into it. Everything about her past said she did not belong. And none of it, not her nation, not her history, not the law that named her an outsider, none of it was strong enough to keep her out, once grace decided to let her in. She thought she was simply following an old woman home. She was walking into the family of God. In the end, Ruth's story does not shout, it settles. A famine, and a road, and a field, and a redeemer. An old woman who thought God had abandoned her, holding a grandchild who would lead to a king, and beyond the king, to the Christ. A foreign widow whose name, against every law and every odd, was carved forever into the lineage of the Savior. She never knew any of it. She never saw where her small, stubborn loyalty was leading. She simply chose faithfulness in the dark, one step at a time, and trusted a God she was still learning to know. And that may be the most quietly astonishing thing of all, because the deepest wonder of her story is not that a Moabite found a home in Israel. It is that through her, through a grieving widow gleaning in the corners of a barley field, in a town called the House of Bread, God revealed the very heart of the gospel. Long before Jesus was ever born, He had already shown us who He was, a Redeemer, searching a field for the ones the world left behind, and spreading His wings over a stranger to bring her home. If Ruth's story moved something in you tonight, if you've ever stood on the wrong side of a wall and quietly wondered whether there was a place for you, then stay with us. The Bible is full of people the world overlooked, and God did not. Every week, we walk through another one of these stories, slowly and honestly, the way they deserve to be told. Subscribe, and you won't miss the next one. And if this reached you, take a second to like it. It's a small thing, but it helps these stories find the people who need them. If there's someone in your life who needs to hear that grace still reaches across every border, share this with them. It may find them at exactly the right moment. And before you go, one question for the comments. When you look back at your own story, where have you seen God work through something you once thought was only loss? We read every answer. Until next time, may you find yourself under His wings.